Hello, so this week we're doing some design refinement again. Now remember you started that last week by doing 3 folio pages, and this week you should be aiming for another 3 folio pages per presentation. So just a reminder about what design refinement is. If we look at, there's an example there by Raylene Ong. If we look at what design development is, we might consider that that's the experimentation using the methods, media, materials, and design elements and design principles. So design refinement is design perfection using the methods, media, materials, and design elements and design principles. So remembering again that design refinement is assessed by criteria 4 and criteria 5, which is how well you use the 3 M's and the design E's and P's. And that's it, I think, that I wanted to say for this slide. Oh, just a reminder that it's an additional 3 refinement pages. So at the end of this week, you should be able to look through your folio and say, yes, I have 6 refinement folio pages at the very least for each presentation, and you'll need to submit copies of that at the end of this week so I can give you some feedback, and then you'll be on your way to doing your final presentations, making a start on those next week, week 8. So next week you'll then have 4 weeks from then to produce your final presentations and to get your pitch ready. So really this is the last week of refinement and getting, pulling things together. So I've got some examples to show you. In the previous slide there was the word alien. That was an element that Raylene Ong, a previous DECV student, was just refining for this particular cover that she's designed as one of her SAT presentations. So you can see here the folio page which shows various screenshots. She's annotated which elements and principles she's been refining, and it's very comprehensive. Here's another student's folio page. Now this student was in the top designs this year actually. Her name's Ella Fenton. She did a swing tag, and I can't remember, sorry, what the second presentation was. But anyway, you'll see here the refinement of the actual shape of the swing tag and the scale of the images on this swing tag. Here it's quite big. Here it's smaller on this one. So really she's just been playing around with the position of the typography and the image. But you'll note that she has settled on a typographic style and also on the image and how it has been produced, which method. Here is another top design student folio page. This student, Nicholas Rose, actually designed a temporary shelter called the Shelter Pod, and this folio page really just talks about some of the details of his design and how it fits together. So here we see mention of Velcro, skylights, some of the joining mechanisms for the structure. So everything's been very detailed. He's underlined here too whenever he has used a design element or design principle. So hierarchy is mentioned. And here's another top design student, Bridget Slater. Here we see a 2-dimensional final presentation, which is a poster. And she's got her image and her typography pretty much worked out. But this refinement page just shows some slight variations and tweaks on the background colour, the colour of Ned Kelly's mask, and also the colour of the rectangle which represents the eye slits. You'll see she's explored cropping here and enlarging the scale of the image. She's used shape here to make the text stand out with this solid black rectangle behind the text. She's also explored different typography. Oh, that came out funny. So we've got lowercase in this instance, and then uppercase, and she's made a comment as to what the appropriateness is and which one she'll go for. She's also explored the figure ground relationship, and here she's really exploited it by making quite a bold version with a solid black background. Now when you're sort of getting towards the end of your refinement, and you think, yep, I'm really happy with how things are going, you'll actually need to start creating a mock-up. Now, a mock-up is really the final chance you have to test and evaluate the production of your final presentation and the position of your images and text on the page. So really a mock-up's like a final draft before you do your final piece, and it's a really important stage because it just gives you that opportunity, that one last opportunity to get things right before you do your final presentation. And if you don't do the mock-up, you might end up making mistakes on your final presentation. So look, it just gives you that opportunity to get it right. The mock-up needs to be quite detailed, and it really should show the client pretty much what the final piece, or as close to the final piece as possible. So here's an example of a mock-up that was done by a former student. So her SAT communication need was to design a costume for the singer Tori Amos, and here she's indicated on the mock-up which method she's using, which is painting, and the media that she's going to use, in this case watercolour, and she's practiced it so we can get a very clear idea. She's shown front and back of the costume. She's also given us an indication of the layout of the final presentation and how she's divided up and gridded up the page. And then this was her final presentation. So it's fairly similar, but obviously there has been some change. She's just shown the back of the costume, not the front, and the position of the head is in a different placement. So she would have, I haven't included it here, but she did provide a pretty detailed evaluation of the decisions and the steps between this mock-up and the final presentation. Now, if you're going to be doing a model, a three-dimensional final presentation, then a mock-up might look like this. So this student, which is a top design student again, Charlene Lee, she's done an elevation here. She also did an orthogonal or a plan view drawing of the measurements of this early learning centre. So this is a good example of a mock-up, just giving an indication of one of the views of the early learning centre. And you can see that the correct drawing conventions have been applied, the scale has been indicated, it's been labelled correctly as well. So we might just talk about some of the nitty-gritty of getting the mock-up together and things that you should be mindful of. Firstly, what size? Well, for most of you, it'll be around A4, but just think if your final presentation is a certain size, the mock-up should really be about half that size so that we get enough of an idea about what it will look like. There will be some, variations to that depending on your SAT, and if you're not sure about the size, then please just contact me and we can talk about it. Creating the mock-up means you've got to sketch out the basic shapes. You shouldn't be using too much freehand. It shouldn't be too loose and scrappy. It's not a visualization drawing, which is what you did at the start of your design process. It should be pretty neat, so use a ruler if you need to. Include the typography, labels, and position them exactly where they ought to be. Think about point 3, producing typography in the correct style. So no hand-drawn type here. It should be as close to a type style as possible if you are hand-drawing it. You can use a computer if you like to actually get the text right, and a photocopier, and you can cut out the text and sort of position it where you need it to be on the layout. You need to use graphic markers, Derwent, paint, whatever it is that you're applying your colour to your image. You need to use that in your actual mock-up. If you are going to produce a computer-generated mock-up, then that's fine, not a problem. What will most likely happen is that before you really settle on the final presentation, you'll just have a printout of the version just before that, and that will be your mock-up. If you're doing a prototype, which is a three-dimensional either construction or mould of something, then as I mentioned before, your mock-up will be a series of technical drawings which will show the dimensions and the scale, or that could even be a smaller version of the model made out of card, or if it's a product, you could mould it out of plasticine. But again, there should be evidence of you in your folio leading up to that mock-up showing which actual materials you did experiment with. So if you've done a model, you know, there should be either little tiny swatches of foam core or balsa wood or card actually cut out and stuck in your folio on a page, or you can show photographs of yourself using all those different materials. So the mock-up is not the time to experiment with different materials. You should have done that well before. And finally, the most important thing, or one of the most important things with your mock-up, is to annotate. It's all very well to have the mock-up there, but unless you've provided a really descriptive reflection about the decisions you've made and the process you took, it's not going to really mean that much. So let's go through some of the things you want to be annotating about. Well, the first thing is, how well does it satisfy the needs that you've stated, you know, and how well it meets the purpose. So if the purpose was to advertise, you know, does your piece actually look like a piece of advertisement? If your final piece needs to address a female audience, you know, have you actually picked the design elements and principles that can best do that? And does it meet the client's needs? So have you actually put in place all the things you said you were going to do in the design brief? The second important point is how well you've used the design elements and design principles, and how well you've used them to create a piece of beauty, an aesthetic finish that you're happy with. You can also talk about things that you might want to improve, because once you've done your mock-up, it'll all come together and you can make a bit of an evaluation about how successfully your final piece, you know, works. You also want to be talking about the media and some of the methods that you've used and whether you need to make any improvements to that. You know, if there's fine line pen on paper and the fine line pen starts bleeding, then you might want to make a comment about, well, which paper am I going to use where that will not happen. And there it is. A mock-up that hasn't been annotated is really not complete. So just ensure that you include them just to make your folio really, really complete. I think that's all for this presentation. If you need to, you can print out the PDF and then make sure at the top right hand corner, which I'll just show up here, there's a tiny little icon in the PDF which just shows you a bit more detail and some of the notes that I refer to when I do these little video presentations, so that might help you as well.